There's an election coming next month, and we're in a series comparing and contrasting the parties and candidates, helping you to understand what's at stake. Last week, we discussed at length the issue of liberty. Would electing Republicans be better or Democrats? We learned that the leadership of the Democrat Party has been taken over by Marxists and Maoists. Just as one small example, Vice President Harris was raised by an admitted Marxist economist. Even Snopes gave that a fact-check true. And Washington Post calls her out for her promotion of price controls as being communist. Add to that her stances on reparations, fracking, and decriminalization, and her policies look remarkably close to the 45 goals of Communist Party USA. Now, they're trying to scrub her record, and she keeps changing positions while she claims holding the same values. It's a cynical attempt to rewrite the history of being labeled one of the most liberal senators to the left of socialist Bernie Sanders. Tim Walz also has Marxist-Maoist ties, having taught students on the virtues of socialism and distributing copies of Chairman Mao's Little Red Book. Like Harris, Walz has an obvious communist track record in both statements and votes. By contrast, Trump is an avowed capitalist. When we compared the liberty track record, there's little question that Trump wins. But you have to look past some mean tweets and tune out that obvious media bias against him. You wouldn't know it, but he was nearly assassinated on live TV. They've hidden that. The media has produced reports that are 84% sympathetic to Harris and 89% negative towards Trump. They're in this full throttle, and that alone should give you pause. Your liberties would suffer in a Harris administration unless you're an insider and fellow traveler promoting Marxism and the destruction of the traditional family. We've proven that Harris would be bad for your liberty and the economy. But how would she stack up against Trump in regard to security? Join me in the Economic War Room, where you will learn how your choice in this election will impact your future. This is the second of a three-part series titled, What's at Stake? Today, we're talking about your security. Security is a powerful word from the Oxford Dictionary. It means the state of being free from danger or threat. Security is one of the most important and most legitimate roles of government. No one wants to live in a dystopian world with a zombie apocalypse or Thunderdome or water world where it's every man for himself. That's why we fund our military and police forces, to keep the peace, to keep Americans from danger or threat, to provide security. We're not talking about bank bailouts or wealth redistribution or guaranteeing equity rather than equal opportunity. The founders' view of security was rather simple. Protect the borders, win the wars that have to be won to protect America, protect private property rights, and protect individuals' rights to personal liberty. Quoting Benjamin Franklin, "Those who give up essential liberty to purchase a little temporary safety deserve neither liberty nor safety." There's a recent argument as to what he meant by that quote, so I looked it up to get the context. First, it's about safety, which has a security component but is much broader. Security at home would be about making certain your house wasn't robbed or invaded. Safety could encompass whether or not you might slip in the bathtub. A home security system does not mean non-slip tubs. But yet, Franklin's quote was in a letter that dealt with taxation and armies. He was making the point that to be 100% safe, you could tax away everyone's property to fund an all-powerful army. But you would have no liberty, and your safety would be short-lived. Put in another context, you can guarantee all investing is safe, but without some risk, there's no possibility of returns. So should the government have prevented settlers from moving westward for their own temporary safety? Of course not. But the government did have a role in providing Western cavalry units to enhance security. Consider the Buffalo Soldiers, mostly black American Army units created by the Congress in 1866 after the Civil War. Quoting the Smithsonian, the Buffalo Soldiers' main duty was to support the nation's westward expansion by protecting settlers, building roads and other infrastructure, and guarding the U.S. mail. I'm pretty certain they weren't doing safety inspections, but they were tasked with security. And this takes us back to Franklin's quote. There is a legitimate role of government in providing security, but it should not be at the expense of economic or personal liberty. To compare Harris and Trump, let's break down the notion of legitimate security into two parts: national security and local security. In terms of national security, the federal government has two roles. The president is commander-in-chief and charged with protecting the borders and winning wars declared by Congress. Starting with the borders, we have a history with both candidates. Although the media has tried to rewrite history, it is a fact that Kamala Harris has been the border czar during the Biden administration. Of course, given the disaster at the border, she wants to be unburdened by what has been. Those, by the way, are carefully chosen words to gaslight you. She was appointed border czar in March 2021, just 2 months into the Biden presidency. Everyone knew it, and it was the left-wing media that called her the border czar. If her policies had protected the border, this would be her top campaign issue. But her efforts were a miserable failure, according to findings from the House Committee on Homeland Security. Even NBC's Lester Holt called her out on this when he interviewed her. He said, "You haven't been to the border," Holt stated. And she said, "I haven't been to Europe either. And I don't understand the point you're making." Well, if you're the border czar, you should go to the border. Now, I could go through the statistics, but sometimes a picture's worth 1,000 words. Contrast the last year under Trump with the average with Harris as border czar. This is from Heritage Foundation. 10,249,626 people during Biden's term. While she's border czar, on an average month, 240,000 almost versus 62,000 entering the United States. That's a big difference. Of course, this count doesn't include those entering who evade authorities, and under Trump, we would deport. Under border czar Harris, illegal immigrants are settled into the American cities. Beyond that, these figures do not include the people that this administration has flown in, hundreds of thousands of additional migrants into the heart of America, bypassing the border entirely. So what does this mean to you? First, there's an enormous cost to allowing so many illegals into our nation. And second, the Democrats admit they want all of these undocumented immigrants to be given citizenship. This would fundamentally reshape our nation, as we've seen in Europe and we're now seeing happening here. Take Aurora, Colorado as an example. The police and media have denied there's a Venezuelan gang problem there. But I dug into it, found a letter from the top Democrat law firm Perkins Coie. This law firm, you can't make this up. It's not a right-wing source. They say, after concluding multiple witness interviews and reviewing video and other evidence, it appears that a Venezuelan criminal gang has taken over the property. The evidence we have reviewed indicates that gang members are engaging in flagrant trespass violations, assaults and battery, human trafficking, sexual abuse of minors, unlawful firearms protection. This is a Democrat law firm, and it's just a fraction of the security threat from the more than 10 million illegal, undocumented immigrants placed into American cities under Kamala Harris's watch. All right, we need to take a break. But you got to admit the border is a serious problem. When we come back, we're going to dive deeper into the other security risks that a Harris administration would pose. We'll be right back after this break. In uncertain times, finding stability in the economy can feel challenging. But what if you could navigate economic volatility while honoring your biblical values? At Timothy Plan, they believe this balance is possible. Timothy Plan filters its volatility-weighted ETFs and family of mutual funds through a biblical pro-life and pro-family lens, so you can see competitive returns and moral responsibility, helping you to weather the economic storms. With Timothy Plan, align your investments with your values while adapting to our ever-changing culture. Since 1994, Timothy Plan has been recognized leader in biblically responsible investing. Timothy Plan, your bridge between faith, finances, and the future. Visit timothyplan.com or call 1-800-TIM-PLAN or 1-800-846-7526. Investing includes risk, including possible loss of principal. Before investing, carefully consider a fund's investment objectives, risks, charges, and expenses contained in the prospectus available at timothyplan.com.
Throughout history, the spirit of patriotism has prevailed. The battles may have changed, but the values remain the same. Today, in 2024, we find ourselves at a pivotal moment where the call for unity, freedom, and a better future echoes louder than ever. For more than 10 years, Patriot Mobile has been committed to supporting the values that make our nation great. With affordable plans and reliable nationwide coverage, Patriot Mobile is not just a wireless service. It's a call to action for those who believe in the American dream. Because this year is not just any year, it's the most important year since our nation's founding. Choose a wireless carrier that shares your values. Choose Patriot Mobile.
What makes it so difficult in comparing the candidates for president is that you have no idea which Democrat is going to show up. Harris, who has clearly favored open borders and a path to citizenship, is now showing ads and promoting a border wall. Even CNN and Axios have called her out on that extraordinary hypocrisy. And this is precisely why we are concerned about the possibility of President Harris regarding security. The risks are simply too great to waffle on that. Let's use the Afghanistan withdrawal as case study. We know that President Biden warned against a rapid withdrawal as senator, but then did it as president. In 2007, then Senator Biden, running for president, admitted that to properly withdraw from Afghanistan would take a year unless you left all the equipment behind. Then it would take 6 months and those weapons would be used against us. Despite knowing this, for more than a decade, Biden still had a total security failure, according to his own generals. And it was his lack of preparation and planning. Quoting PBS, the top 2 U.S. generals who oversaw the evacuation of Afghanistan as it fell to the Taliban in August 2021 blamed the Biden administration for the chaotic departure, telling lawmakers Tuesday that it inadequately planned for the evacuation and didn't order it in time. And just as Biden warned, the weapons we left behind will be used against America. Foreignpolicy.com quoted, "The Taliban are now arms dealers. Terrorists are shopping their left-behind American weapons and turning them against Washington's friends around the world." Our chaotic withdrawal cost the lives of Americans, left behind billions of dollars in equipment, and demoralized the military. At present, morale has fallen every year since Trump left office, with 6 in 10 members of the armed forces now describing their morale as low. Under Harris, experts suggest we would have to reinstate the draft and that she would insist on drafting women to combat positions to make up for the lost personnel. And yet, despite a dwindling military, the Biden-Harris team seems intent on being active and adventurous in wars abroad. Many experts believe we are on the cusp of World War III, if not there already. There's the risk of a Chinese invasion of Taiwan, a war in the Middle East, and of course, Ukraine. We know that the Biden-Harris team has been fighting a proxy war in Ukraine against Russia. Harris has been an open advocate, although she might deny it tomorrow, of course, and the cost is measured in hundreds of billions of dollars. Cato estimated $240 billion just through this past April. By contrast, the Trump administration was the first American administration since Reagan that didn't start a new war, and he did rebuild the military and morale. He did have a strong track record, and he did not surrender sovereignty to international organizations. By contrast, Harris would absolutely kowtow to the UN, the WHO, and other globalist groups. Beyond globalism, Harris has shown much greater sympathy toward the Hamas side in regard to Israel than Trump or even Biden. She's tried to thread the needle, but clearly worries our best Middle Eastern ally, Israel. That is purposeful, as she's playing to her base. It's also worrisome. The final national security issue deals with a slipped release recently of officials within the current administration who want to, how shall I say it? They want to queer the nuclear arsenal. I know, that sounds like a Babylon Bee headline, but it's a real thing. Quoting Newsweek from August 22nd of this year, a nuclear policy expert appointed to the Department of Energy under the Biden administration in February 2024 previously co-authored an article entitled "Queering Nuclear Weapons," which argued queer theory should be used to inform American nuclear policy. This guy works as a special assistant of the National Nuclear Security Administration, the agency responsible for maintaining the safety and security of America's extensive arsenal of nuclear weapons. Now, we've absolutely seen the queering of the military with Marines wearing heels and dresses. It's so bad that if they made a remake of the comedy MASH today, they'd make Corporal Klinger a general because he wore a dress and, he'd be running everything. But how do you queer a nuclear arsenal? The answer, published in the Bureau of Atomic Scientists, is to let LGBTQ plus people be in charge. In other words, abandon traditional Judeo-Christian values that are not inclusive. Do you think that increases our national security? I don't, but it fits the narrative of substance over reality that we've come to expect from Kamala Harris. Okay, that's on the national side. What about local security? We've already discussed borders. The problem is that once you let in so many undocumented migrants, you have the risk of increased crime. We already know that hundreds of thousands of military-age males have crossed our borders. We know that massive amounts of fentanyl have also come across. Quoting a House study from April, in March, CBP, including air and marine operations, seized 1,392 pounds of fentanyl coming across the southwest border, bringing the total for the fiscal year to 9,657 pounds, enough to kill roughly 2 billion people. We know that known terrorists have entered the United States. We know that chatter is high for a coming incident, higher than before 9/11. Both the CIA and FBI have been issuing warnings. But if the attack is local, you really can't count on your military. Your first line of defense will have to be local. This raises the question, would a Harris administration be pro or anti-police? We know that during the BLM riots, she raised money to bail out rioters. Of course, the media has done verbal gymnastics to try and get her out of that one. Let me ask you a simple question. If you were hurt by criminal activity, would you be favorable on those raising money to bail out the perpetrators? Of course not. And yet now Harris is holding herself out as a big supporter of law and order. For me, I think asking the police who would be better for local security might make sense. In this case, it's obvious. The Fraternal Order of Police has strongly endorsed President Trump. The FOP is the nation's largest and oldest union. Here's what they've said about their endorsement. Public safety and border security will be important issues in the last months of this campaign. Our members carefully considered the positions of the candidates on the issues, and there was no doubt, zero doubt, as to who they want as our president for the next 4 years, Donald J. Trump. That's the oldest and the largest police union. The FOP's endorsement is unique in that every member has the opportunity through 46 state lodges to make their voice heard to national trustee. Once informed by the membership, the national trustee casts his or her vote in the national board meeting. Bottom line is, this is felt across the board, across states, they prefer Trump. That's a very strong endorsement. While they didn't release the exact figures, we know well over 2/3 of the FOP lodges went heavily for Trump. This includes many lodges in traditionally Democrat areas. Don't let them gaslight you on this. In terms of local security, the vast majority of experts stand with President Trump. Yes, Kamala Harris was a prosecutor, but she's also a woman who bragged that with a swipe of her pen, she could ruin the lives of innocent people. She bragged that it didn't matter if you were guilty or innocent. She could charge you and thus ruin your reputation and ruin your finances. At times, she has been pro-police, even too much when it served her interests. Progressives falter for the mass incarceration of African Americans for political gain as Attorney General of California. At other times, she was soft on crime. Overall, her record has been a flip-flop nature. Does your family feel safer than it did 4 or 5 years ago when Trump was in the White House? We need to take a break. When we come back, we'll dive further.
Somewhere a perversion has taken place. Our natural unalienable rights are now considered to be a dispensation of government, and freedom has never been so fragile, so close to slipping from our grasp as it is at this moment.
Freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. It has to be fought for and defended by each generation.
You and I have a rendezvous with destiny. We'll preserve for our children this, the last best hope of man on earth, or we'll sentence them to take the last step into 1,000 years of darkness.
In this most critical time in our nation's history, now more than ever, Americans need to align with companies that support our constitutional rights and God-given freedoms. Patriot Mobile supports your values and provides exceptional 100% US-based customer service. Join the movement today. Go to patriotmobile.com or call 972-PATRIOT.
Among my greatest concerns with the Harris administration is that the deep state will be unleashed and unchecked. We've already seen that the intelligence agencies can go after a sitting president and then follow up with raids on his home, criminal charges, even after he leaves office over classified documents. We've seen the double standards regarding how they treated President Biden in comparison. Never mind that Trump had declassification authority and likely could have taken with him what he wanted. That was the stance the government took over the documents found in former President Clinton's sock drawer. It's clear that the intelligence community was out to get Trump, just as Senator Chuck Schumer predicted they would. Schumer said on MSNBC that if you take on the intelligence community, they have 6 ways from Sunday at getting back at you. They brought forth the now totally debunked Russiagate. But what if they turned on ordinary citizens? Last week, we shared how former Congresswoman and former Democrat presidential candidate Tulsi Gabbard was targeted. Former Rolling Stone reporter Matt Taibbi was also targeted. Why? For their political opposition. The IC has been weaponized and they've gone after Americans. This is perhaps our greatest local security threat. That and the double standards being applied in favor of political friends and against any opposition. A praying grandmother blocked the front of an abortion clinic and she can be arrested and put in prison for 2 years, while many demonstrators who contributed to BLM riots where property was destroyed, they've not even been charged. How is that justice? How is that security? Do you feel safer knowing that grandma went to prison? Or was that more for political show rather than public safety? The answer is obvious. What happens when they define a tweet as hate speech and come to arrest you? Will you feel secure then? This is already happening. In Michigan, a woman shared information on social media that was deemed misleading. Now, the Attorney General of Michigan is threatening to prosecute. Remember what Kamala Harris said? She had the power with the swipe of a pen to decide who to prosecute. She could ruin a person's life on a whim. In addition, the left has plans to turn all of Americans into snitches, asking us to monitor our neighbors and turn people in as if we lived in Nazi Germany. We saw that with COVID, and we now know that the government pressured social media companies to force compliance. Mark Zuckerberg had to apologize in a letter to Congress. If they can make one of the richest men in the world comply, imagine what a police state could do to you. Another security concern I have is the big push that a Harris administration would make to disarm the American people. It's no secret that the VP is anti-gun and anti-Second Amendment, even though she claims to own a gun. Look at her record, both in word and deed. The NRA says she is an existential threat to the Second Amendment and supports gun confiscation. That's in the NRA papers. It's very unlikely that she will voice that opinion too loudly as a candidate right now, though. But you can be certain she would enforce it once elected. The NRA has cited all her actions and efforts to eliminate guns of all types. This is just another example where she takes both sides of an argument depending on who she's speaking to. But her record and her heart on the matter are clear and obvious. Harris would not want you to have a gun to defend yourself, and that's a matter of personal security. If she were to defund local police while arming the IRS and government agencies, would you feel safer? I certainly wouldn't. My final concern on security with the Harris administration is the worry of a Manchurian candidate. Let me read from a Washington Times article written by Peter Navarro, published September 3rd. He said, the Manchurian candidate, a term immortalized by a famous Cold War thriller, represents a political figure who is unwittingly brainwashed by a foreign power to undermine his own nation. While fiction often mirrors reality, in unsettling ways, the story of Kamala Harris's pick for vice president, Governor Tim Walz, and his kowtowing relationship with China reads like a modern-day remake of that book and film. If elected, Mr. Walz would be the highest-ranking U.S. official ever with such extensive ties to China. And let's not be naive. China's influence operations are real and they're pervasive. As I've written in Death by China and Crouching Tiger, the Chinese Communist Party has a long history of using elite capture, targeting influential figures in foreign countries to advance their agenda. In these capture operations, which involve thousands of operatives, the party either uses honeypots, the seduction of Representative Eric Swalwell by Fang Fang, or moneypots that shower academics, businessmen, and politicos with cash, emoluments, and prestigious appointments. China's state-run media have certainly given us an answer. They were practically giddy when Ms. Harris announced that Mr. Walz was her running mate. China Daily columnists even asked whether Mr. Walz would be the chosen one to bring sanity to U.S.-China relationships, a code word for whether Mr. Walz would soften America's stance against Chinese communist economic and military aggression. In the 2024 presidential election, we're not just choosing leaders, we're choosing the future of our nation. If Kamala Harris blasts Donald Trump, Mr. Waltz will be a heartbeat away from the presidency. In the cutthroat world of international politics, where America's sovereignty and security are perpetually under threat, we face the chilling reality that a Manchurian candidate could be knocking on the door of the White House. That's Peter Navarro's opinion, but I'm sad to say it's well-grounded in fact. We know the Chinese Communist Party has already been successful at placing spies at the highest level of our government. They did it recently with the governor of New York, Linda Sun. Here's a quote from the Justice Department statement. Sun is alleged to be an undisclosed agent of the PRC and CCP using Chinese money and her influence within the state of New York to benefit the Chinese government. Sun and her husband then laundered millions of dollars for the foreign country and used the monetary benefits of this scheme to buy luxury vehicles and million-dollar properties here in New York. That is from a special agent in charge of the IRS and Justice Department in New York. These have been regular announcements, so it's impossible to deny that China is trying to influence us. We have evidence of Chinese spies inside Google, at offices of senators and congressmen, at major companies, and it's only getting worse. Consider this from Foreign Policy magazine last year. China has been waging a decades-long all-out spy war. Don't you think they'd love to see Harris and Waltz in the White House? There are so many examples that I have a very full file of articles regarding public reports of caught Chinese spies, but those are only the ones we've caught and reported. If Waltz were a Manchurian candidate, things would get exponentially worse. Now, everything I've shared is well documented and well supported. Basically, I believe that Kamala Harris and Tim Waltz are true believers in Marxism and Maoism. They will say what is needed to grab power. That is what is at stake in terms of security. All right, we're going to cover the next episode. We'll talk about values. But if you watch that debate with Harris and Trump, you could see very clearly the Chinese-oriented positions. She talks about Ukraine. She talks about all of these things, but she does so from a Marxist, Chinese-oriented perspective. We cannot allow her to sit in the White House from a security perspective. So we've now covered liberty, Trump's better, security, Trump would be better, and in the next episode, we're going to be diving deep on values. All right, we'll summarize all of this in our free economic battle plan, and you can get a copy at economicwarroom.com. The important thing is there'll be links there that back up everything that I've said. You can walk through and find evidence of her Maoist background, her father was a Marxist, and so forth. Remember, what we see as a marketplace, our enemies view as a battle space. This is Kevin Freeman from the Economic War Room.